Oh, should I leave the meeting now that it's being recorded? Oh,
That's on
such
you.
pressure.
I've given you the warning, and now you choose how to proceed. Hey, everybody. It is AT Town Hall Day. It is a Monday, September 20th. I feel like we should start that way every time. It feels very radio-ish. Monday, September 20th. How are we all? I hope we are doing well. Karen had a success, and I told her to hold it until the recording started so she could share. So Karen, kick us off. A positive. Go ahead.
I love positive. So I went to a school district this morning. I had this district, fortunately, tried to convince the parents not to do an AT eval, but to instead do a consultation and coaching, which is always excellent. And so when I met with the special education teacher, she was doing so many awesome things already. It was a student with ADHD and high incidence issues, executive function. She was already, he's got written language issues too, organization. She was already using the insert comments feature in Google Docs. She was already using, wait for it, Google Keep. She was already using the version history to see how the document evolved in Google Docs. I was thrilled. It's so awesome when you see that educators are already using these things, because that is not typically my experience. I don't know. I did have a few other suggestions for her, and she just was a sponge. So it was really great. I don't know if other people have that kind of experience where, oh yeah, we're already doing that. Oh yeah, we're already doing that. When you go in the first time, it's always fantastic.
It is, right? Because then you feel like you've got some foundation to build from, right? It's not building it from the bottom up. It's got something there already.
Yeah, and that she is so open to ed tech options to support her learners was really great. The other thing that was cool that she had done really low tech is she had these 7 note cards, large note cards all over the room with different things that the kids in the learning center had to do, because she said, I like them to get up and have to move around and go from that's such a great low tech. I did, of course, suggest, well, why don't you try some QR codes as well? And again, you can get the kids moving, but it's a very tech proficient school. The other thing, I did send a photo to Mike and Chris and Beth in the parking lot at the school. I think it's the most affluent district in Massachusetts. There was a Rolls-Royce SUV in the teacher parking lot. You don't expect to see that.
Unless you go out into my driveway and then you see 2 of them just sitting. No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, right. That was a shock. I had to take a photo because I've never, ever seen a Rolls-Royce SUV, but to see it in the teacher parking lot made it all the more surprising, unexpected.
Karen, do you think that has something to do with how tech proficient or friendly the teacher is? Teachers are, like, higher SES, is more access to tech, is more comfortable using it, or is there not that connection? I'm just
possibly curious. What was interesting too is this particular special education teacher said she went through that particular public school system and was on an IEP. And so she's really trying to think long-term with her learners. So that was an interesting history to hear from her as well, because I did ask her, what is, this is, to be honest, you are an anomaly in my experience. And she just, feels like you've got to show kids everything. You got to make it possible. So that was really great.
That's awesome. The thing, Karen, that I love about that story is that the beginning started out with asking for an evaluation and then working towards a conversation about a consultation with interactions throughout, which I think is such a positive way to approach that. And it's nice when educators and administrators and family members also can see the value of that as a path forward.
Right. Yeah. It was just fun to be able to, hear why she's doing different things and hear her perspective. And she is the best educator for this program. She's really outstanding. It was really awesome.
That is really cool. And Carol dropping stuff in. Carol wins farthest distance to join the town hall. Congrats, Carol.
And it's literally 5 o'clock somewhere for
Yeah.
her.
I mean,
So she could be,
There's no prize for that in true AT town hall fashion. There is no prize for that. You just the satisfaction of being the winner should be a prize enough.
yes.
But yeah, Carol dropped in that it's thinking about looking long-term with learners instead of being reactive all
Yeah.
the time. And that's that
Isn't it great,
consultative
Carol?
kind of.
When they have that perspective, she's all about, we were making them dependent. I really want to promote independence in my students. It was, so anyone else have something similar or even better?
Oh,
Another
Karen, thank you for
success
taking
story?
that. Look, I have to call my executive director who's just calling my phone for some reason. So I'm going to bug off for 1 second. Karen, you're now officially in charge. Congratulations. Good luck.
Yeah.
Keep the same level of professionalism that I like to bring to this.
Right, yeah.
Or if possible, which I know it would
How
be, step it
how
up.
to emulate, Mike?
Step it up a bit. Because
So
I'm
who
like
else?
the bar we should just barely scrape by. All right. I'll be right back.
I'll just jump in and say, maybe she'll become a teacher who was consulted by Karen 4 years ago and became an ATP and is now sitting at this round table. So
Yeah. Yeah,
you
'cause
might
the
not
other thing-
remember me, but
Right, yeah, that's another, because she has presented at our Mass Q, our Mass Computer Using Educators Conference too. And again, that's not my experience. Somebody tell me if yours is different, but a lot of special education teachers don't even know about the ISTE affiliates in their state. So, so to hear that she actually had even presented was so fun.
Well,
Do
and I
other-
think to me, it says something good about what's happening in that district in terms of just like level 1 UDL tech knowledge, to know all those things were available and they could try them, whether you're a reg ed or special ed teacher. You know, I think that's somewhere where I see some gaps just in my own area is like, we all have access to Google. And when I say, have you tried voice typing? Sometimes I get that blank stare, like, you mean like that dragon thing that costs a lot of money? No, I mean that thing that you open up Google Docs and you go to tools.
Yeah.
So I think even trying to appreciate the fact that like they jumped in and were trying things without, you know, without having to have a district or outside resource come in and say, try these basic things. Cause then you can add on to that level of, here are some other great things that could help now that you know this base level, instead of spending your time getting them up and running on that base level.
Right. Yeah. And again, it always depends on what is it we want the learner to do and what is it the learner wants to do that is difficult, which always guides. Yeah, we always have to throw in that caveat because, you know, we tend to look at tools before the set framework.
Well, especially for high schoolers, even older middle school kids, you know, you could have the best tech idea ever, but if they're like, that's not going to work for me, then you've just wasted a lot of time training people and trying to get them on board on something when they're like, no, I'd rather do it on my phone, or I'd rather do it this way. And getting that initial buy-in from them by them giving some feedback in is so important. Because I think if we were to look at like the tech abandonment literature, I would venture to guess that there's a huge chunk of that no one ever said to the user, whether it's an AAC user or an Access Tech user. No one ever said, what do you think? Like, what do you think about how we're going to do this? Because either they know their bodies really well and they know something's not going to work right off the bat, or they have a preference. And just like I get to pick whether I use tool A or tool B, they should have that option too.
Yeah. That's another good topic for us to talk about, tool abandonment. And one of the things I'll never forget from reading a research article in AJOT, the American Journal of Occupational Therapy, is they brought up the point that it depends on the teacher messages, and these can be both verbal and nonverbal. Kids pick up on what their teacher is thinking, how they're presenting technology, that sort of thing. I mean, we need to let educators know how you present things, and even your nonverbal language, your nonverbal cues sends a message to your learners.
And
So-
most of our kiddos, most of our tech users don't want to be a bother. So if they get the impression
Exactly.
from a teacher that this, I have to go set up this other extra thing. Like, and it could be one comment they hear and that kid is done. Like,
Exactly. Alyssa, that's
Yeah,
so
it's so true.
huge.
Alyssa, that's like one of the saddest stories I ever had was working with a student and talking with him about things to help him read out loud test questions. And he was maybe it was like an upper elementary age, so like that 4th, 5th grade range, somewhere around there. And I remember asking him in the first time we met, I'm like, would it help to hear things multiple times? He had an aide that would read questions to him. So the epitome of independence right there, he says incredibly sarcastically now that I'm back. But instead, so I asked him that and I said, well, what do you do normally? He says, well, I ask and it gets read to me. And then sometimes I ask again. And so I was digging in a little. I'm like, oh, so you mean sometimes you get it on the first shot? And he said, no, sometimes I just watch and I get kind of an aggravated look back and then I just answer. And I was like, oh, that really kind of sucks. And I remember talking to him and we went through all of these technology tools to try some things out. And I put some stuff in place. And then I remember I wasn't seeing him one week, but seeing him the next week. And he was trialing in between with this in class. And I remember seeing him in the hallway. And just, I gave him a wave and he came running over and he's like still small enough to call me Mr. Mike, which is a bonus right there. Mr. Mike, do you know what? And I'm like, no, what? And he said 3. And then he ran away. And then I realized that's what he meant. 3 times is what he needed to hear it to answer. And he got a chance to do that because the computer didn't care how many times he asked.
Exactly.
And it led to an interesting conversation because, and I'll pose it to the group, do you go back to that educator and have that conversation about what happened with the student that they're supporting? Alyssa says yes right away. I'll break the surprise. Absolutely. I did. If you couldn't guess, I'm fairly upfront about things, but yeah, I did. And had that conversation about what happened.
And in that exact situation, I would use the Lipitnostra model to problem solve.
Did we just
nice
pivot?
Segue.
Just saying.
Did we just pivot?
Nice
just saying. I know you had something else. Was something else you want to talk about before then? But I mean,
there was something I wanted to talk about before then. We could talk about it after. Oh, that pivot was so great. I hate to ruin it. No, let's talk about Knoster first, and then we'll talk about it. I won't forget. Don't worry. I have it written down. Like for a change, I actually took notes for today, and I was ready. Because I've sensed that Karen would take over a minute, and you would like her more leading the group. So I wanted to prove that I was under control. So let's talk about the Knoster model. This came up. Alyssa, awesome. Thank you. Because I was about to say, give me a second and I'll pull up a picture of it.
Yeah.
This came up at AT Chat. Is that where we were, where this came up?
Yes.
Yeah. And it was one of those things that I happened to have been in a team meeting earlier. And I had said one of the most exciting things was being able to share this with the group and see so many people that weren't familiar with this.
I love this. Mike, you and Karen know that. I mean, we've used this, and I think this is the one. Sometimes you don't always see. There's a column that sometimes isn't always in there. Is it the action plan one? Yeah. That you don't always see, and I think it's a really important.
Yeah.
There's actually another one because there's another one in there. Yeah. Whatever. I think it's the action. I don't have it pulled up on my computer, but it is a very powerful. It's a powerful, not just for but it's for reflection. Like if you have done something and it didn't go the way you thought it would have, using this as a reflection tool to go back to and think about what did I miss out on it? Like I didn't, where did I mess up? And I've done that. I mean, when I had something backfire and I realized, I didn't explain the vision for this, or, I'm usually pretty good about, there's things that we're like, well, we know we need to have the resources, or I can do the skills, or, but did we explain the vision to somebody?
And I think, if we're, especially in a tough kiddo situation with the team member or the team as a whole, to me, even if it's, I don't go to the team and bring this to them initially, but if it's with my coworker, I'm talking through, you know what, like they're just not like implementing AAC. They're not taking data. They're not. So talking through, well, did we explain to them this? Did we show them exactly what they need to know? What is the buy-in for them? In this case, we're seeing some problematic behavior that I'm using air quotes, that is really a need for communication. So then we're like, okay, do we need to give them another handout or resource, or do we need to show them the bigger plan? And again, to me, sometimes it's just collegial conversations through this. Like I literally have a paper version that stays right at my desk of this. Because when I'm talking to somebody, sometimes it's a matter of talking through what isn't happening well in this model. And I'm going to share with you, this is from a Wakelet, but I'm going to share with you this entire Wakelet that's got this blog in the very beginning is really, really helpful. And you'll see that it's referred to here as the Lipitnostra model, because this guy actually went and dug deep into the history. Like Knoster used it as at a presentation at TASH in 91. But if you go back, it actually is like, there's some other references to 87 and some other places where it actually came from. So that's why they're calling it the Lipitnostra model. And it literally goes through the entire history. Like this one looks similar, but you can kind of talk, it looks a little bit more clear at what's missing. And again, the whole Wakelet has YouTube videos on it, has just blogs about it. And again, I share it with all of my team, my people who are doing coaching, mentoring to kind of help problem solve. And then the other thing that's in there, that's this big PDF, I absolutely love. It's this canvas for like talking through or planning, where it's meant for a business setup, but you could easily put school and end user or district and end user here and talk through like, what are the goals? Why does it matter? What's in it for everybody if we do this? You know, talking through all the little pieces, like what do you need to make change? And then what I like about this model is these things back here trying to kind of talk through like, okay, that's that last column on the original model. Like what happens if that is missing? Because usually that's what you see, like that's the evidence that things aren't going well. Like it's a false start. They use it really well for a week and then they abandon it, or they're like, oh, we are not using this. That tells me they don't see what's in it for, you know, everybody, including the students. So I will put that Wakelet in the chat box as soon as I go back and find the bit.ly again that I made for it.
Yeah, I love looking at it from that model of, from that viewpoint of where are you, whoever the you is you're working with. It could even be yourself as well. Where are you in that purple column? Like what kind of purple are you right now? Am I frustrated? Am I angry? Am I confused? Where am I? And just like Elisa said, I leave that by my desk. I'm so mad I haven't been to my desk in forever because I have a really nice laminated version of it at my desk at my office that just sits there now. But that exact same reason of where are you? And then I can start to work backwards quickly. And I like that idea of looking for what's missing and giving something tangible to them quickly, right, that starts to make them instantly feel a little bit less purple, for lack of a better word, if you're living in that purple box.
Exactly. To me, it's the thing that we would talk about in research is like the felt need, that immediate, like whatever the adult who's having a kickback, usually it's the adults, honestly, that's having some kind of kickback reaction, whether they're confused or they're resisting, or like they try for a little bit and then it bombs, you know, it's usually them. And it's usually like, oh, I don't get it. I don't, you know, if you can identify what that felt need is, or what that purple evidence of what's not being met, then you can go back and say, oh, like, oh, we did not really fully give them the reason. Like, let's go back and talk about why would we even put this in place in the first place? And what I love about it, again, I love it from a coaching and mentoring perspective, because I think it helps give an emotional conversation and unemotional context, because people are always kind of heightened. But if you take it back to like you're feeling frustrated. Let's go talk in like the logistical reasons why you might be feeling frustrated. Yes, I hear you. I hear that frustration, but you know what? It's probably because we didn't do something we were supposed to, and immediately kind of flatlines that conversation from being like, take this iPad and shove it, to like, how can we then implement it, or what do we need to do differently to help, instead of having it be just this like stuck in purple.
Yeah. And like Carol said in the chat, it takes it away from being a failure of that person to a failure of the system that that person is part of. And then you can talk systemic, and you can talk about deeper solutions. And you can get somebody away from the, oh, I'm so bad, I can't do anything. And you can say, well, that's not you at all.
Right.
It is what you're dealing with in this system, and let's try to move forward. And I know someone mentioned that idea of reflective too. I love that for times I'm feeling that way in one of those purple boxes because of some project I'm working on or something else. And then I can go back to the person who's working with me on that project and ask for the support I need out of the missing box. And it helps focus them instead of just saying, I don't feel like we're being successful right now. And then this going back and forth of, well, what should we do? And how should we do it? And there's all this back and forth. Instead, I can say things like, I'm concerned about where we're at. And I'm feeling like we need more resources to support this project. And I'm doing that because of where I'm living in that purple box at that moment.
Right. Hillary, are you okay if I put you on the spot? Can you unmute and
Hi, I'm camera
Hi,
ready.
friends. So I saw in the chat you were talking about a state DOE call where they were less than desiring and using what was an appropriate accommodation. Do you feel like their resistance to it, they're being resistant to it? Are they, what, can you tell me more about what that situation is?
This is why I love you, because you always ask really good questions, and I need to learn to be better like that, even though you'd be proud of me because I did ask a really good question at the webinar. Can you help me understand how you got to this conclusion? Because I don't understand it.
That's a great question.
Because I didn't, because in the state of Maine, we're pivoting away from like MEA based to NWEAs as part of the state assessment for reporting. Now, NWA, as you know, allows for text to speech in all elements of the reading as here's a word I'm going to say, universally designed accommodation. It's just a support. It's just there. Hi, but it's all or nothing. And apparently people in the state of Maine don't seem to like that for whatever reason. Ableism. I'm sorry, was that out loud? And I apologize in advance for being a little snarky about it because I'm still kind of
frustrated. You are frustrated because
it's frustrating. It's frustrating because I asked them, how can you allow text to speech on the math as an approved accommodation? So the whole entire math portion can be read, problems and everything, using text to speech. But for kids that, we have that AIM box checked off and have Bookshare access or have Learning Ally or use text to speech to access print, they are now being told, oh, I'm sorry, you can't use that tool to access the reading passages, but we'll let a person read the directions and the answers to you, but not the passages. And there's a script that people have to follow because they don't want any unfair biases. So if something is bolded or italicized, you can't read with emphasis or de-emphasis. You have to be very careful about that.
Correct.
And furthermore, they couldn't even answer about users who are blind or visually impaired who use screen readers or Braille as their preferred method of access.
Because that's not in their vision.
Yeah.
So do you think it would help to leverage what other states are doing for those kids who have significant decoding deficits?
I agree. I need to find those states that are doing it and are doing it well. That's you. So we need to talk.
We have a unique
pushback.
accommodation. We have a unique accommodation in place for kids who have a severe decoding deficit. We have to show that they have that severe decoding deficit, and there's a process. It also involves giving them the UPAR. to show that there's a distinct, help, that their comprehension improves, whether it's text read or human read. And it might be good to look at a couple of those kids, that used it in the past and leverage data like in the U-PAR to say, you know what, their comprehension is higher when it's text read than it is human read.
Yeah, I was thinking about it because a lot of the kids that have these accommodations already, I've already done a PAR. We're not U-PAR yet, but I've already done a PAR on those kids to justify that accommodation and make sure that it's clear in the IEP as to what, context and things like that.
So are there other states represented here that have a different way of having the reading passages read aloud as a unique accommodation?
Well, in Massachusetts, yes, again, it's like what you said, Alyssa, they have to show a severe discrepancy when it comes to the reading portion. Then they can use text to speech. They are not using human readers. Well, unless, I guess they're giving the choice. I honestly don't know. But just to get back to that PAR issue too, Hillary, have you ever used the U-PAR? Because you think that the U-PAR is what we want, but U-PAR is designed to give to large groups of students.
I use the individual PAR one-on-one in assessments.
Yeah. And the PAR, I think, gives you more information.
It does.
Individually. I was hoping the U-PAR would do that.
It doesn't.
But it doesn't. I was frustrated.
That's like a universal screener.
Yes, exactly.
Do like something like this. I do a PAR.
Yeah.
Because I also because I taught reading and taught in special ed, I also kind of understand, like, sometimes it's not about the tech, it's the technique, right?
Exactly.
Be a bumper sticker, Hill.
Yeah.
But
and it's a sticker, it's a shirt.
It is. It's not always about the tech, it's about the technique. Because I've had some kids recently I've done PARs with, and it's rephrasing questions or noticing that they can only take in a certain amount of information, and then we need to stop and ask a question that's connected. And we're building strategies as well.
Exactly. So from the perspective of the state, is it just that they just don't have knowledge of this little pocket of kids? You're talking about your VI kiddos or a kiddo who has a significant decoding deficit, and they're making a decision based on their vision for the 98%.
Yeah, our kids with
versus the 2%. So maybe it's coming back to them and saying, hey, knock, 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 reminder, there's this other subset of kids. And I'm not asking for every kid to have the reading test read aloud to them, but we need to be aware of the fact that we have obviously decided this kid needs accessible instructional or educational materials for a reason. How do you recommend that we provide that accommodation that parallels their IEP? Because again, we're not supposed to be giving them an accommodation on a test that isn't something that they're using on an ongoing basis in an instructional or assessment,
Yeah. Right.
Scenario.
And that's a good scenario. And plus that was one of my, and that's why I jumped on today too, because I knew I'd get supported answers from my AT friends.
Well,
Thank you.
The other thing,
humanizing.
Hillary, I do have a question. How did they answer your excellent question? I mean, they do.
Did they?
What did they? That's the right first question.
Well, I got the stroking of the ego, which I don't need. It's such a great question, Hillary. Thanks for asking. No, I want an answer. Help me understand how you got, and they didn't like, well, this is, I got this is the way we've always done it, in a not direct way of saying this is the way we've always. For years, we've had not, for MEAs, this is kind of historic practice. And I don't care because it's wrong. Change practice.
Right.
Have a nice day.
So to me, then this is a follow-up email. This is, I was so happy to attend your webinar discussing these topics. I wanted to follow up on my question because I feel like there is a subset of the population that's, that maybe isn't being accurately attended to in this. Here is why that's important. Here is why. And again, to me, when I think about what the incentive would be, it's why would we change things up on kids who have demonstrated
that was my follow-up question, is so help me understand how I can explain to a kid who uses text-to-speech accommodations as part of their daily practice. This
effectively uses it
every day, effectively, and that was their language. I used it back. How help me understand, how do I explain this to this kid? This is what they use in their practice, and now they're going to be in a testing situation and they can't use the supports that they are proficient and do really well with. How is that?
Those are the questions, is that, you know, we have a student, a learner that has developed a skill in order to learn information. We move to the test that's supposed to demonstrate the knowledge they have gained, and yet they can't use that same support. And so, yeah, it's completely backwards. Doesn't make any sense at all.
I think that's one of the conversations that I always end up bringing up at that point too, is what is the test assessing?
Right.
What are we assessing? Are we assessing comprehension? What is it we're assessing? Because otherwise we're assessing whether or not they can do this one skill that they have accommodations for, and we're not actually getting at what they know.
Right.
Usually they don't have a good answer for that one.
No, they don't. And they're like, what's your email? We'll follow up. I'm like, okay, you will. And then I immediately like emailed my state assistive technology to say, this is the update, and I'm not happy. Updated our head of Catholic Care, who runs our programs for the blind and visually impaired, who I'm closely connected with, and have a contact at DRM that I'm going to.
And I think it would be all about it, like Callie was saying in the chat, so maybe even gathering user voices that are like, you know, this is the technology I use, and here is why it is, I like this and not this, for being able to get it in. And again, the good thing is this is a state assessment, right? So this happens in the spring, right? So you have a little bit of time.
Actually, no, it's happening because they're doing it in the fall and the spring. So they're using it twice.
So,
which NWA before allowed for that. And then at the district level, we were given the choice. And so our district that chose to allow, obviously, text to speech for the reading portion, because it's wrong to not. And the state stepped in, you know, and said, we're going to do NWA for our state assessment to make it easier, because we're in a pandemic and we don't want you to do another assessment. Well, now they've come in and just stepped all over it, and it stinks. So
I would follow up and push for an answer to what about, I mean, because are you going to read it aloud to a student who uses Braille?
The thing is, you can't even read aloud to a student who uses text to speech, because you can't even read the reading portion, like the passage itself.
Right.
The direct, which I find so it's a layered issue for me.
Yeah.
There's a lot happening there.
The reading passage is problematic, number one. Number two, lack of an answer for Braille and visually impaired support other than Zoom accommodations is not something I'm excited about. And then the three, not allowing text to speech for those users that is an approved accommodation, they're proficient at it, they know their stuff, or saying, oh, blind users can just use JAWS. Well, we have kids that's not what they're learning right now. They're learning iPad with refreshable Braille display, because through our process,
what they need. Yeah.
Through our process, we've determined with that child that that's their preferred method of access.
Right.
That's
so
not
when you say layered, Hillary, it's so true, because you're also educating about assistive technology being person-centered. So there's a lot of layers here. And so that, you know, and I go back to Kelly's comment, which really just resonated when she put that in there, that idea of that, you know, the way we've always done it, you're changing mindsets now. And obviously it's not going to be easy. It's probably going to be incredibly painful. I'm going to give you a positive and say it's an opportunity right now. It doesn't feel like it, because you're still kind of living in the moment of, well, that was really crappy. But looking at the positive side of it and kind of jumping off what Elisa said in that follow up, I also, just like you, I wouldn't wait for them to follow up with me. I'd follow up with them. I would fire off that email relatively soon, maybe not right now, because I'd be a little hot. And if I could encourage you, maybe not to fire off that email when we're done, but maybe sit on it for like a little bit. But I think that talking to them about that idea of those things that you've brought up, and give these little like paths that are obviously make sense to support these learners, and then offer up your support. You know, I continue to go with that theory that people don't know, people don't do because they don't know.
Yeah, and I am being I am Fonzieing it right now, Mike. Trust
Yeah,
me.
I think that it's so interesting that, you know,
So wait a
and I've had
second.
similar conversations at our state DOE level. And sometimes I leave those meetings kind of surprised at what's going on, right? It's like, where, you know, you hang up, you shut off the Zoom and you sit there for a minute and go, what the heck just happened there? Like, this is the group that in my mind should have most of the answers or most of the knowledge to make those answers. And yet I hang up sometime and I go, holy cow, how do people in this meeting walk out of a room without banging into a wall? Like, how do they not miss the door frame as they're leaving? Because they're just missing big picture pieces. And you know, sometimes it's really hard to do.
One of the things, Hillary, you said that the testing is happening in a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
There is real urgency over this because there are students who will become so discouraged at
Right.
this point in the school year, and setting them up for failure is never a value to
Right.
learners, never. And so we can be polite and, you know, all we want, but our students, your students are going to have a really negative experience that is going to probably impact the rest of their school year. I mean, we're setting them up for failure is just so problematic. And
Yeah.
so,
And even if you're going to test them again in the spring, and I could almost see an answer coming back, well, we'll give the test now, and then we'll work through it. And then by the spring, we'll have something positive. But I would argue, go right back to what Karen just said, is that by the spring, it might be too late already. You've done the damage in the fall.
yeah.
Well, they've done the damage historically because it's never been, that we've always done it this way. That's damage has already been done.
Yeah.
But for those kids that are new at that, now we're just, what else are we creating and barriers? And I said, I did allude to that in the chat at least. So, but I am definitely crafting an email.
It's almost like you need phase 1 plan and then phase 2 plan. It's like attacking the immediate access issue. And for that 5%,
right.
And maybe that's using data from other states, or just what is your answer to, you've told us all along, it has to be in line with what they're using on their IEP. Now it's a different story, like that phase 1. And then the bigger story is, how do we handle as a whole them understanding that role of assistive technology and aim and connection?
That's the other layer to that issue that to me is a bigger picture thing, is that role and the importance of assistive technology, because what they're doing is creating another barrier, obviously, or just
that's a phase 2. To me, it's like, let's tackle the immediate, and then let's think through, okay, what opportunity does it give you for education? I know opportunity is that double-edged sword that people like, but it's an opportunity for you to funnel your passion about this into, how can I help you as a state understand why this is, again, adding a barrier to students when the whole role of special education is supposed to be about the opposite.
Oh, that was the other thing. There was another thing kind of related to this. We have grant fund. Every state has grant funding, right? For like COVID funds and whatever. Yeah. And so my boss had come to me and said, hey, what about those telepresence robots that you used to use? Couldn't we use those with kids to access like in-person learning rather than just remote, like have something a little different as an option? And we could have a fleet, one in each school, or for kids who are out for medical needs. And then they can use that to navigate through the school, but still access classes and be a part of like the collaborative discussion. They can see materials on the table. What do you think of that, Mike? That sounds like a good idea. So we write this grant. She also put in for accessible playground equipment, because our kids who have complex needs or have wheelchair, our playgrounds are not accessible, right? So put that in. The head of the state, they came back, dinged the grant and said, that's an access issue. That's an IDEA, like they were just kind of juxtapose one. And I'm like, no. But that our job is in my mind, our job is as educators is to remove those barriers by doing that, by putting an accessible playground. And it was like, so we got we're very creative and we figured it out. But the fact that that systemic barrier is there at the state level for kids with disabilities is so problematic for me. And so thank you for letting me process that.
Well, and Cassie has a really great point in the chat. There's also the student end of it. How are we going to address it with students so they're not showing up day of test day and go, just kidding, this thing you know all along, you can't use it. And what she asked a very valid question, why would I keep using that tool if it's, if I'm not gonna be able to even use it on a test? I mean, I've had to have those conversations about co-writer because right now for a lot of our kids, that's not an allowable accommodation to use word prediction. But I go through the timing of them. I think, okay, this test is 2 weeks of your life. Okay, yeah, you can't use it during those 2 weeks, but the other 300 and whatever amount of days you can access it and it's helping you. But I mean, absolutely, I think, not to the point of like, get upset because guess what we just did as a state? We put a barrier in place for you, but like address it enough with them that they understand why it's still important to use that tool because it's benefiting them.
Well, this is something that I'm working with a group of junior high students right now who kind of came from elementary into this junior high environment and immediately said, I'm no longer using these tools because now I look different than my peers. So I'm just not going to. And we're trying to work through that, what's the benefit of using them and, what environments can you use them in and how can we work around these things, trying to help their teachers understand and support. But this is the conversation we're going to have. I don't want to use it. I look different. I don't want to do this in the classroom. And now I can't even use it on a test anyway. So, and we're right back to abandonment.
Right.
Exactly.
So we're talking about barriers, we're talking about abandonment, and we're talking about dependence too, because when the directions can be read by an adult, that's promoting dependence. And I always say, well, what, like you brought up earlier, Mike, what if you didn't get it the first time when they read the directions? Will you please read it again? On a high stakes test, is a learner going to ask them to read the directions again? So this is so multi-layered and complex, and it's just horrifying to hear.
Yeah. It's funny. I'm reflecting a little bit on myself. I feel like the voice of reason, which is weird. I want to rant too, like Hillary a little bit, but I'm looking at it from the other way. This is a great opportunity for talking to these learners about self-advocacy and building community. I know, Karen, I know what you're going to say. I was waiting for you to say it instead of just shake your head.
No.
I know.
You know how I feel. Fine, but senior year of high school work on self-advocacy. In middle school, there are some a small percentage of learners will be able to self-advocate, but the rest of them, they're dependent on the adults for liking them. They're dependent on the adults for their grades. They don't, like someone said, they don't want to be a bother. They don't want to annoy their teachers. They don't want to stand out. If they don't want to stand out using the technology, why do we think they're going to stand out speaking up for themselves in the classroom?
It's interesting. And I think to Cassie's point, and maybe she's just got super aggressive kids she's working with, and I hope so. That's awesome. But I've also worked with those kids where, they're going to tell you I'm not going to use it anymore because there's no reason to, and they're going to get angry about it, which is great. I'm one of those that thinks anger is good. Be angry, but then you follow that right up with, well, then what are we going to do about it? Well, then what's going to happen?
Exactly.
How should we solve that? And then go
Recognizing
forward.
these issues from the student perspective, what are we going to do about it?
Right.
And Twatty, that's the way we've always done it, doesn't work.
Yeah.
We've got to be creative, and like, other people have alluded to, like Kelly and Elisa, bringing people through the process. The problem is when students are being harmed today, taking the time for that process is long-term vision, but what are we going to do right now when these high stakes tests are going to be done in 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah. And one other thing I thought, I know Hillary turned her video off. Maybe she's pounding on her desk somewhere. I hope so. Oh, darn. There she almost came.
I was taking notes and processing what was being said.
No, I'm kidding.
I'm like, no, I want to channel that into action. I don't just want to for complaining sake. I want to change this because it's wrong. And
I think, Hillary, one other thing I would say, and I got to feel like you might have already realized this and done it, is I'd reach out to your ATAC and be like, look, we need to fix this.
That was my first email.
Yeah, because they might have a little bit more of a relationship with those people at the state level.
Mhm.
You know, and it might be easier to get that introduction in, like, oh,
Mhm.
this is Hillary and she really is on it and she knows what she's talking about. It's not like, ooh, yeah, well, that was her in that meeting, remember? And
Right,
then they kind of, yeah,
exactly.
but instead partner with them and have them make change, because those are those kind of systems change higher levels that the ATAC should be helping you do.
Yeah, and I'm wondering too, like, how could, I think that's a bigger question to ask John and Jesse at
Yeah.
Main Site, that kind of question, like, how can we maybe collaboratively work together, put our heads together and figure this out so that the state can understand that what they're doing is causing an unintended barrier
Yeah.
for kids who
Yeah.
are using text to speech as AT or other non-traditional forms of AT.
And
you know,
I'd even toss it out on Twitter and ask our AT people, like, does your state, just a poll even, does your state allow non-reading, the reading passages to be read aloud for students who have significant decoding deficits or something? And try to leverage some of that data to say, you know, it shouldn't be that Massachusetts does something different than Florida, then does something different than Maine, then does something different. We know reality, but it should be that, like, hey, you know what? 40 states allow this thing to happen. Why? What's the story? And again, there's that phase one problem solving, the immediate, we got to figure out something for like the test that's happening this fall. And then there's the bigger picture, like Mike said, get the people who have some pull in terms of the state organizations in the conversation with you to help problem solve. How do we solve the scenario?
And I do have one other topic, and I feel like this
Yeah.
10 minutes that has left might be a nice little pivot of this. Maybe give Hillary a chance to breathe a little bit. This is a great conversation. I'll bring it up again next week. I put it on my list of topics for upcoming chats, and we'll continue to chat about this. But the other topic I had actually came to me through an email during the week to bring to the group as a what do we do kind of thing. And it was about an individual, and it still fits in with our Knoster model issue that's happening here. It's an individual who's frustrated about their service in their school and how they're able to provide service. And they're frustrated because they lack the additional resources, more team members, more resources to provide support, and already starting to feel overwhelmed this early into the school year because there's a lot of need and there's so few people to provide this support. And so the question was, does someone have information or resources that talk about how many staff members you should have providing this kind of service to the number of students? Like, what is that ratio? And I didn't have an answer, so I said I would bring it up here. And I'm just curious, how do we approach that? And we can certainly have a whole conversation about capacity building, which again is a little bit of a longer term solution. But I didn't know of anything that was like, you should have one person to every 150 students that need services. I don't know if anybody else have that, knows that, thinks about that.
I feel like when, gosh, Gail and Denise maybe did a pre-conference at ATIA.
About like the shifting team or
Exactly.
I don't know the name of it, but that was kind of the
in
overall.
Like day one of the 2-day, there was something about, and I'd have to go back and look because we went years and years and years ago, about like whatever the calculation was, it was something ridiculous that we will never get to by population. But I remember there was something, and I don't know what it was based on, but you know, I remember there was something in Denise's stuff that in DeCosta's like handout that said it, but I've never seen anything official that says, you know, like we have a funding allocation for teachers and for OTs and PTs. I've never seen anything official for assistive technology. But when I think about reasonable caseload, Like, what could you actually physically get to and do productively? I know it's nowhere near what our reality is. So what I've tried to do is then set up systems that help to manage the fact that we can't be in every school every week. How do we help have on-demand resources and have some of those like easier problems solved without having me to have to go to a school?
Yeah.
What-
And then there's
What
the,
we do is
oh, sorry,
track
Jennifer.
our referrals. So we have our AT consultation request form, and it just goes into a Google sheet, and we even categorize the referrals that we're getting. So if they're reading or writing or vision or, communication, whatever they are. And at the end of the year, that spreadsheet is ongoing. We just have tabs for each year. And the first tab of that spreadsheet is a comparison of year by year. So at the end of one of our last meetings with our supervisor of the year, or when we're discussing staffing, which is typically more in the winter, we always go back to that and show how each year our referrals have grown and how that's why we're feeling so overwhelmed and we need more support. And that's really been successful in us being able to achieve somewhat manageable caseloads. I don't have a number, it's more of a feeling, because it's kind of, it's almost a weighted caseload. I mean, there's some referrals that just take a little bit of time, and there's others where a full AAC evaluation with a funding report to insurance is going to take us way longer than maybe, implementing some Chromebook accessibility features that meet that student's needs. So that's how we track it and how we've been very successful in getting more time added. The problem we're running into is that we can't find enough SLPs, so they're not going to give us an SLP for our team, which is where we need more of the support. And so they're not going to rob Peter to pay Paul. They feel like caseloads in our district need to be thought of first before they're going to help us out. So that's why we're feeling a little overwhelmed this year. We were approved to get more support, but because we're short-staffed with our speech therapists, they wouldn't hire another SLP for us. But they know the need is there, at least through that tracking form.
Yeah, I think that's a great strategy, Jennifer. When you think about starting to put that in place, is you first have to know kind of what the situation is with some hard data beyond the I'm overwhelmed, I need help. And because then it only opens up for someone to say, well, why? And then you have to have that information anyway. And so thinking about that, it also gives you that kind of collection space that you're talking about through the form, also gives you that opportunity to track what's coming in that can be sent to those other activities that Elisa talked about. It's creating content, creating materials, creating resources that might address a lot of that. I think you'll get a handle on some of those things you can do quickly to start to knock some of those down, right? Give people quick, instant access to information to allow them to potentially help themselves.
Yeah, and even we had a meeting with our supervisor today, and we were talking about how we were feeling very overwhelmed at the beginning of this school year. And I went back to our form last year, and we actually had more referrals to date last year. But then when I looked at the type of referrals, they were more reading and writing, which typically aren't as time intensive for us as our AAC referrals. Now this year we have far more AAC referrals, just 16 days into the 20 days into the school year than we did last year. So that really, to me, was like, okay, there's some validation there for why you're feeling so overwhelmed, because yes, we did have more referrals than we did last year. So even some of that can be really beneficial in seeing and helping you work through some of it.
Yeah, and also it gives you a sense too, if you're seeing fewer referrals in a certain area of support, you can look back to, have we done other things in those areas that have given the staff the ability to start to address those? And maybe we'll see those referrals maybe in the next month or two as staff start to work through what they know and kind of what they can attack and try. And then they maybe potentially hit a wall and they go, okay, well, now I need to trigger a referral. But isn't that what we want them to do, right? Is try some things, get back to us with some information that allows us to then jump in and support. Go ahead, Cassie. So you jump on.
I would say that one thing, and I kind of like you're saying, and Elisa was saying too, I often will tell teachers, if you're repeating yourself, make a visual, right? And so I'll do the same thing. If I'm noticing I'm getting the same request or the same question coming through multiple times, and it's something that maybe doesn't require me to be right on site, I'm making guides, I'm making handouts, I'm making videos, I'm saving the videos. I've got a website up where I'm putting, all those videos. And it's really decreased the number of times that I'm going into a building for speech text or text to speech or some of those more common, more UDL tools. And, that saves me up time then for more of those intensive things. Doesn't mean I'm not ever going out for those, but those systems definitely save me large quantities of time the further I go on.
But don't you think, Cassie, some of the trick with that too is in that moment of feeling overwhelmed, you don't even have the time to make those things.
One thing that I learned with that though, is I started recording myself when I was answering people.
Yeah.
So I learned, I was like replying to these emails and like typing out these same paragraphs over and over. And finally, I'm like, this is dumb. So I did it as a video recording. And now I can send that video out or I can post it.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to do it as many times. But in that moment when you're overwhelmed, it's hard to remember to do it.
Exactly. That's
like
exactly it. It's remembering
I'm like, really?
that. Not when you're hanging up and you're like, oh, there was my missed opportunity, but instead thinking of it ahead of time, like, ooh, this might be helpful. Maybe a strategy might just be to record all.
I've recorded a lot of stupid stuff that I've deleted too.
I agree. I'd like to say, yeah, I record a lot of garbage too. And then I'm like, what am I doing here? Get rid of that. No one should ever see that again. But it's just there. It's just auto record so that I have it. And I found that's been helpful because I don't always think about it the second I hang up from that call. Like I should have recorded. It might be like the next time I get asked, I'm like, that's the exact same conversation I just had. But then I can go back to it. Luckily, I don't clean my computer out, so it all sits there anyway, so it's fine. But yeah, having those
Hillary just said in the chat too, screen recordings have been a lifesaver.
Yeah.
Typing out an email and trying to explain to someone where to look on the screen. Okay, look here on your screen and then look over here for the like screen record.
So and I use
that.
Yep,
I use Loom for that 100% of the time because Loom allows you, and the other Screencastify might, but it allows you to put, it's for marketing, but to put a link on the top right of the video. So if they're like, where do I go to do a thing? I'll show them and then I'll put that link that's hyperlinked. It's like the target link. I forget what they call it. So that then they can just click on that link and go right to the page and either do it along with me or do it right after they watch it. But Loom has been a lifesaver for that and email templates, because if I answer one question more than once, I'm saving it as an email template so that when I go to address swallowing and feeding plans or an AT referral, here are the steps for an AT referral, I don't have to write it again. I might have to edit it and add a couple things in, but those email templates have saved me in terms of having to do that all over again. Yeah, Jennifer, go back and look at Gmail email templates. They're super helpful for the things like Cassie said that you find yourself saying it on the second time. You're like, save an email template. Even if you go back and use it 2 other times this year, that's 2 less times that you have to write out all the everything with the hyperlinks and the videos embedded and everything. It just saves it.
Yeah. And think about, I always go back to this idea in the schools that I'm working in. When I'm seeing a bunch of these questions, I start to add those resources into my signature on my email so that it's always there. Maybe that changes every couple of weeks, maybe like a week, 2 weeks, something like that. Hey, did you know, whatever that little did you know is, and then a link back to a recording or a worksheet or some kind of tip sheet to get them to. And I don't have any hard numbers that say how many that saved me of referrals. In my heart, I'd like to think it saved me a bunch because I don't hear about those topics a lot from people, which makes me think, well, they're getting it from somewhere. So that's always a good thing too. Awesome. Look at that. That was good. Well, guys, it's the top of the hour. We've done it. You've validated my use of this index card. I will continue on this path and be a better person as I come prepared for our meetings. Other thoughts before, someone just put in, Hillary just put in Flipgrid.
Flipgrid.
Shorts. Yeah. Yes. One thing before you guys go, don't forget, if you haven't signed up yet, our virtual AT conference is the end of this week with some of your friends that are right here, right now. We'll be presenting, and it's free. and you can come for little or a lot. It doesn't matter. So check out, I put the link in the chat to the website. You can see the schedule. You can see who's presenting when. You can get your ticket for your free, or your link for your free ticket. And hopefully we'll see you on Thursday and Friday. All right. And with that, I say to everyone, go forth and enjoy the rest of your week. It was good seeing everybody.
Have a great week.
Have a good one, guys.